Okay. So I'll give Mart an introduction in a second. I always think of Mart as being very enthusiastic, which, yes, he has lived up to that. But so today we are going to first learn, our committee for the day is the advisory committee. I'll let Kathy talk a little bit more in depth about what that is, but this is actually all other committees you hear from are actually subcommittees of advisory. This is our overarching bigwig leadership. They control the funds and all that kind of stuff. So Kathy is current chair of advisory, and I'll let her take it away.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, I'm Kathy Halloran. I'm class of 2017, so I'm not one of the real legacy master gardeners, which makes me understand where you are. 4 years ago, when they came and talked about the committees, I didn't listen. I thought, I gotta tell you, and I thought, I'm not gonna get involved with a committee. I did that all through my working life. So, fast forward, I was working with a marvelous legacy master gardener, Kathy Lamb, in 2018 and 2019. And she asked me, she was going to be chair of the advisory committee, so she asked me to join the advisory committee. Because I didn't listen in class, I didn't know what the advisory committee was. So, of course, Kathy I wish I could remember what she's forgotten about plants in North Carolina. And so, of course, I said yes, because I was so in awe of her. So now I get on the advisory committee, and then the following year, the chair, Mary Ann Chapp, asked me to be vice chair. And because I didn't listen, I said, oh, sure, I'll be happy to be vice chair. And when you're vice chair, you're automatically chair the next year. And I went, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? Yeah. So now this year, it's so funny, 2021, I'm chair of the advisory committee. And I have to tell you, the name is not as exciting as public events, engagement and retention, initial training, continuing education. But advisory committee lets you see the overall work that all the master gardeners and through the committees do. And it's been fun. We not only talk about what we're doing, but all those committees that you're learning about have to come to the advisory committee to get money. And because we follow the budget. And we make sure we have money for new programs, expanding programs, making sure we're doing our mission, which is to serve the population of Durham County, and to help Extension serve the population. And if we have that money, we have to use it very judiciously. So the various committees or individuals have to come to us and ask for money. Let me just give you an example, and then I'll be done. Mm-hmm. So we meet monthly for 2 hours on the second Tuesday of every month. Everyone is welcome. You might want to come and listen to one. We do it over Zoom. It couldn't be easier. You just get in your square and off you go. In September alone, we approved funds for the demo garden. A lot of funds, 4 figures of funds. And then we also approved funds for the plant sale. But what we do is they have to present what they're going to use the funds for, how much they need, why they need that much, and then we have to figure out, number one, do we have the money? And number 2, does this fit our mission? And number 3, does it make sense to give them that much? So the other thing about the committee, just like any of the committees, you meet other peeps that frankly you would never get to connect with. And that has been the gift of the committee work that I have done. I have met marvelous master gardeners where because of my interest and their interest in volunteering, we would never have crossed paths. The final thing about the advisory committee is for every meeting that you attend, you get 2 hours of volunteer service. So you're also racking up hours. So as you move along your journey of being a master gardener, if someone out of the blue asks you to be on the advisory committee, my recommendation is to say yes. Thank you. I would love to be. And then you may get on or off, or you may end up chair, like I did, and frankly, it's kind of fun. So thank you for your time, and remember, advisory committee, and we have a meeting this coming Tuesday, and then our last meeting is in November for this year. We take August and December off. So if you have any interest, just let me know, and I'll send you all the information. Yes?
So if we be part of that meeting this coming Tuesday, we'll be creating 2 hours?
Yeah.
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 2 hours of volunteer. And you don't have to say anything. Okay? Any other questions? Thanks, you guys.
That's kind of how we get vice president or vice chairs. We just don't tell them what's about to happen. So we don't have any super big announcements. We're kind of, in the phase where we're trucking along. These are a lot of the talks where we're putting together what we've been learning in other talks, right? So this is going to be some botany combined with some soils combined with some everything else, right? So we're into the phase of classes where these are the more integrated classes. So I'm not going to take up too much more of Mart's time. Mart is the horticulture agent in Orange County. He's got his own Master Gardener program, very active. They are often on the cutting edge of things like moving to online, doing some of the online technology for training. And this year, when our program was fortunate enough to win Search for Excellence for our tomato project, Mart's program won the International Search for Excellence for their demonstration garden. So I believe that was a water-wise garden, is that right?
Right, it's a stormwater retention.
Yeah, so it was just amazing. So 2 for North Carolina, yeah. Woo! So with that, Mart, I will let you take it away.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn this thing on. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, one of the things that I'm part of the farm school, and we do the farm school in this group, and I absolutely hate the acoustics in here. It's terrible. So I realized that a long time ago we need to have a PA system just to. So yeah, I'm gonna take this off if that's okay. Yes. I'll stay behind up here, and then I'll throw it on if I need to come out into the audience. And I think what you guys will see is I do like to come out. So I just hate being stuck behind, and I get really excited. First of all, I'm so excited to be a part, to have been asked to give this presentation. I said, well, what do you want me to teach? And she said, well, I don't know, just whatever. Okay, Woody, okay, it sounds good. No, whatever. I like hands-on. We did our first class with Zoom, the whole entire session on Zoom. It was a very unique experience, and we had to figure out how to do that. We used a top hat, and Ashley was talking about the technology online, and that was a new experience, but I really like show and tell. I like to touch things, I like to hand things over to people and say, here, try this. So I've only been an extension agent for about 5 years. I was in the Army for 27 years, and before going in, I grew up in the city, and so my dad he grew up on a farm, and his point was, I need to teach you how to be a farmer. And so we had a garden when I was little, and my dad knew how to use a one-horse plow, and so we took the deck off the lawnmower, and I drove the lawnmower, so I was his horse as we would plow the garden, okay? But anyway, I didn't know a lot about agriculture, so and I really wasn't sure where I wanted to be, whenever I graduated from high school, so a little bit lost. I said, well, I'm going to be in the Army. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in the Army, and then after that, we'll see where it lands. Well, I went to basic training. It wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. And then when I came home, I joined up as a reservist. So it's kind of like National Guard, 2 days a week, and then 2 weeks out of the summer. And so my dad said when I got home is now what? And I didn't have a plan B. So I started looking at my assets. What do I know? What can I do? And so I kind of floundered a little bit, went to community college, and I met a girl. Lo and behold, she was from this area. She was actually grew up here in Durham County. And on the weekends, she would take me to her brother's or her sister and brother-in-law's farm. And I had an opportunity to work in some tobacco. We actually slaughtered a hog. I got my hands dirty. I really had a fabulous time, and immediately I decided I'm changing my direction. And so I went to school in Catawba Valley Technical College and got a degree in ag business, and absolutely loved it. I got my hands dirty, but then after the 2 years were up, I'm ready for more. And so I said, well, I'm gonna go to state. And I didn't do my research. So they said, if I wanted to go to state, because I'm coming from a technical college, you're gonna have to start over at year one. And I said, not gonna do that. I've already had 2 years, I'm ready to get out and start working. So I went to Tennessee Tech, went out of state, and they took my credits, one for one. And so I got a degree in general agriculture. And while I was there, I joined the ROTC program, and they offered me a direct commission right out of college. And so I took that on. They said, well, join the Army for a year or two, pay off your student loans, and then you can get out and do whatever. So 27 years later, I decided it was time to get out. I went back to school. This time I did go to state. I studied extension education. It was a leap of faith. It really was. Whenever because I retired from Saudi Arabia, and my wife and I had my family there. I've got a small one. He's now 10. But while in Saudi Arabia, we couldn't take testing, so you have to have the pre-testing for master's program and everything else. And so I did come over, visited Dr. Moore. You know Dr. Moore? Okay, anyway, I visited Dr. Moore, and he said, come on over. He said, don't worry about it. You just take the testing. You're a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I'm sure you'll do fine. And so, as soon as we hit the ground in June, I was studying my butt off, with these, how to take a test. And then I went to a test facility, took the test. Hadn't even got the grades yet, but I had to move out. We were at Fort Lee, Virginia. That's why I have an 804 number. A lot of you will wonder. Didn't have a phone at that time when I got out of the Army, so first place I got one was at Fort Lee, so it was an 804 area code. So anyway, fast forward, jumped in the master's program, and then was picked up in 2015, 16 in Orange County. And so I haven't looked back, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do whenever I got out of the Army. My wife said, well, what do you want to do? What was she said, you were really passionate about extension when we first met, and would you ever consider it? I said, well, there's no money in that. There's no money in extension. So, and she said, well, we'll have your retirement. We'll be okay. Follow your dreams. And so that's why I'm in extension. Absolutely love what I'm doing. And that's why I'm here today, is to talk to each and every one of you. And I hope you impart part of that passion of gardening, and maybe you'll get a little bit of information about how to prune a little bit. Okay. So anyway, the other day, I want to put. I wanted to ask a question. I want to pose this: are you a turner or a stirrer? Okay. It's kind of, and I'm gonna put this in perspective. This is my backyard. We don't have a deer problem. They're there. Okay. But you'll notice these two raised beds. That was part of my project. The first part of COVID was I was going to put in some vegetable gardens in our backyard, and so I did. And so the other day I was pondering, well, what in the world do I want to impart in you guys to make sure that what message do I want to get? And as I was turning the soil, trying to get it ready for winter crops that I was a month late in, okay? I was just pondering, what can I talk about? So I wanted to ask you guys, since you guys are new master gardeners, I want to ask you, what is science-based information? Who can tell me what science-based information is? This is a participation class, right?
Research and improve it.
What's that?
Research and improve it.
Research, okay. Research, okay. So experimentation, right? Testing and observations. But those tests are repeatable. So if I say this is research-based and I tell you need to plant, turnips. You need to plant turnips and beets by the first week in September. Okay, it's now the last week and I just got mine in the ground. So I'm a little bit late, right? So research-based means that it is proven that if I get them in the ground at least by September, that first week in September, that I'll be very successful in the Piedmont. Okay, it's not opinion, okay? And I know for a fact that what's going to happen is that my turnips are going to be smaller, my beets are going to be smaller if I can get them to grow and like they're supposed to. Okay, so as I was thinking again, what do I want to impart? As I began thinking, I was thinking about no-till. Okay, and that's why I was sorry. One of the recommendations that our research has shown is for soil health that we look at stirring the soil, getting air down in there without flipping it over, okay? And so as I'm flipping these clods of soil over, I'm thinking, maybe I should just be sticking that fork down in and just wiggling it a little bit, okay? So again, my question to you, are you more prone to do it as we have done it in the past because that's what we know? Or are we willing to take the plunge and just stir a little bit instead of actually turning the soil? Okay, and I will argue that that as these beds, they're brand new beds, have been incorporated with compost and everything else, the soil looked fantastic. It was light and fluffy. And the only thing I have been successful that I can guarantee you right now that I did at the end of that is by turning that soil as I've opened a new seed bed of weeds. Okay? So, think about it.
Right.
Okay? If I would have just stuck that fork in and given a little back and forth all the way along, get the air down in there and then plant it. The seeds that were deep down, they're not going to be up on top and ready to bust out in the spring. Okay. So anyway, that's what I wanted to impart upon you: is are you a stirrer, or are you willing to take a risk and follow the research that is behind our research base? That we're not giving opinions, to the public on. We're not giving our opinion. We're giving research-based information that is repeatable. It's been documented by experimentation. So anyway, now that I've gotten off my soapbox, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the purposes of landscaping. We're going to talk about right plant, right place. I'm going to give you some really good examples of that. Show you some lovely pictures. I won't tell you that this is my house, but if you recognize it, it's probably my house, okay? So we moved in, again, 5 years ago after we got the job, and I'm trying to correct a few things, and you're going to see that. I'm kind of like the painter whose house never gets painted because he's always painting somebody else's. So you're going to notice that, so please don't look at the lawn, don't look at all these other things that you can take into consideration as a landscaper or as a master gardener. You say, oh, God, that looks terrible. Well, just ignore that. Okay. Anyway, we're going to learn about best planting practices, learn a little bit about pruning, and then we're going to talk about some really interesting types of plants. Also, I didn't put on here. At one point, I'm going to switch over and talk about light and sunlight. I want to flip to another slide presentation about halfway through, and then you'll see why. Okay. Okay, so when you are selecting woody ornamentals, a couple questions you've got to ask yourself is what do you want? And talk about what's the local climate conditions and growing conditions, and then what's available. Why is that important? What's available at the nurseries, local nurseries?
They don't sell things that aren't going to grow here.
I would argue differently. I would argue that if you go to certain places like Home Depot, that they're going to put something out there that they have no clue about. But if you talk, and for the most part, if you go to these a reputable nursery that knows their products, you're absolutely right. They're not going to sell you something that probably won't do very well here. Okay, but again, if you're trying to landscape your house, you want to know what's available. And you want to have a list of plants, types of plants, natives, or, what are you looking for, okay? So, I know y'all been beaten above the head and shoulders, right? Okay? I absolutely love this because have y'all gone through and looked at it?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, some of the things you can really do is, you figure out soil drainage. If I've got poor draining soil, what kind of plants will really take up the, to be vigorously grow in there because of poor drainage, right? But anyway, you can definitely look at that, but I also want to bring that up. Okay. As you look at landscaping, you're looking at what is the purpose of that plant that you're wanting to put in. Are you wanting to have it as a specimen plant, or I've got a client right now who had some hollies, and they have slowly over the last 12 years started dying over one at a time. And we've gone out, we've done testing, and I've looked, been out there multiple times, and the problem is can't really find what's causing our plants to die. And so she's asking, well, what do I put in its place? And the problem is that it's a screening area that's screening off a road in Chapel Hill that she's trying to keep the traffic noise in and so forth. But there's some other problems with her area, so she's having a hard time. And I thought, well, we'll stick an arborvitae in there, and then maybe something it's an evergreen. It's a different texture. It's instead of a broadleaf evergreen, it's a needle evergreen. And then I started looking at the light requirements. Oh my gosh, she's got a microclimate there. So boom, okay. This is probably why she's losing her shrubbery, is because there is definitely a microclimate that's going on in there. And we'll talk a little about that in a few minutes. But as we begin trying to identify what is she trying to accomplish with her planting, are we looking at the aesthetics? Are we looking for year-round colors? Are we looking for fall color? Are we looking for something in the winter, such as the dogwood that has the red stem? When the leaves all fall, wouldn't that be beautiful? Just looking at the stems of these things, if you've got it as a specimen plant outside your door, you walk back and forth every day to the car and you see this thing, it's just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. Or what about the golden, the golden dogwoods, something like that, okay? Are we looking for a form? Are we looking for something that's kind of conical, or are we looking for something very formal? Are we looking for something that can provide a form and habit of either a prostrate across the ground, okay? I have to think back. Sorry, wait a minute. Sorry about that. But anyway, are we looking for a bed? Are we trying to cover a hill? Or what are we really trying to do with that? Okay, right plant, right place. Okay, and a garden is not like your interior of a house where you say, "Well, I'll put this in there." Take a look at this. Do I have a laser pointer? Okay. Take a look at this plant. This looks like a palm tree, and where it's planted, under the eave of the house, right? I would say this is probably right plant, wrong place, okay? Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Things that you've got to consider, obviously, pH. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Things that you have to consider, the climate and microclimates. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. The light requirements, okay, very, very important. Soil and pHs, and had a lady come to me yesterday, and in our soils in Orange County, the county got its name for its orange soil. I don't know if you know that or not, but she came and she said, I got my soil sample back, and I don't believe the results. And I said, well, why's that? And so we started looking at it. She said, well, my pH is 7.3, 7.4, 7.2. And I said, well, have you done anything to amend your soil to create a higher pH? I said, have you put any lime on it? She said, no, not ever. And I said, are you sure? And she had pastures, and I said, you know, as I look at these are so close together. How big is your property? And she said, it's about 10 acres. And as I looked at what she had, I said, well, you know, there are anomalies in the county where our pH is high. And I said, you know, there are some things that could explain it. For example, you know, if you were to use organic matter. How many of you think organic matter is acidic? It's not. It's actually more alkaline. It's usually neutral to alkaline, so 7.0. So if you were to amend your flower beds with, say, organic matter, you're going to bring the pH up just by virtue of adding that organic compost to your flower beds.
Even with like pine bark mulch?
Well, that's an exception. So that's a good point. That's not always. I can't say pine fines are more acidic. So you're absolutely correct. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. Okay, but pine fines are ground up pine bark, very, very fine, and that's a strategy you use for blueberries. You know, you plant them on pine fines.
I just did that.
Okay, good choice. Good drainage. There's a lot of positives for using pine fines and stuff like that, especially blueberries, azaleas, camellias, rhododendrons. They all like a low pH. So again, going back to that example where the lady had the high pHs. So I said, well, why don't we send another sample to the lab? And she said, well, that's what I did. That's why I'm here right now, as I'm dropping off soil samples. And I said, well, listen, why don't I just take your samples and we'll go into the lab and we'll just mix it and we'll just check the pHs ourselves. And she said, well, okay. And so we did. We got a pH of 7.2, a 6.6, and a 7.3, I think. So frankly, very, very close, and so we're able to confirm that her pHs were acceptable, the lab results were correct, okay, based on her soil sample. But again, when you talk about sampling, how good is the sample? The sample is only as good as the material that is put into that box. For example, if you take a soil sample and you go to one place in your yard and you dig up a little bit of soil and you stick it in the box and then you send it in, okay? Are you getting a representative sample of your yard? Probably not. Okay, you're getting that one location, okay? And that's why you want to have a composite. It's that soil sample. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So watering, and we're going to do an experiment a little bit later on after the break. How much water does your hose put out? Anybody know? How much water? How long does it take you to get 5 gallons of water through your hose if you're watering a plant? Anybody know? How much water pressure do you have at your home? Anybody know? How much?
70 psi.
What's that?
70.
70? Holy moly, where do you live?
So it was in Durham.
Okay, wow. Okay, I'm getting about 30 psi at my house. Whenever I go camping, I've got a pressure regulator that I put on my camper so I don't blow the lines, and it's regulated at 40 psi. But typically 35 to 40. 70 is very high, and you'd find that in the city. Most, like in Concord, they actually have a pressure regulator that has to be put onto the line coming into the house because they do have high pressure. They blow lines, especially when people are using PEX line or these plastic push together rings and stuff. Anyway, and then also growing conditions of mature size. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple examples of right plant, wrong place. Now this is at my house. Okay, there are 3 pictures here. Okay, and I'm sorry I can't see it very well, but let me just kind of point out. Okay, this is a Magnolia grandiflora, What does grandiflora mean?
Big flat
Big.
flower.
Big, grand, right? Okay, this is Magnolia, right? Okay, what's right above it? Power lines, okay? And it's literally right under the power lines. Okay, this right here is a shrub, and this is trying to think what it's called.
Leyland cypress.
No, it's not a cypress. It is. You know, I didn't write it down, so I can't remember it. Okay.
Cryptomerium.
Cryptomerium. Yes, thank you. Cryptomerium. Okay, cryptomerium. How big does a cryptomerium get?
Big.
Big. Okay. Well, this. Let me just give you. This is about 7 feet tall. This light. Okay. And as you notice, this cryptomerium is actually over the sidewalk. Okay. And this shrub is actually Eddie Lauder's walking stick is what it's called. Okay, do you know what that is? It's a hazelnut. It's basically from a hazelnut.
It's like a contorted filbert, right?
And I wanted to show you. This thing gets huge, by the way. But this is from that. I'm just gonna let you start passing these around and just to look at them. And the reason that they turn. The reason that it turns and twists is due to the light. It's a reaction to the light. Okay? Now, so, what tree is that? I love those. This is, it's in the hazel family, but it's called Eddie Lauder's walking stick. And it's to cut, I actually cut this thing down to about here. In the spring, and you can see in one growing season, it's gone all the way up to here, about 6 feet. Okay? Right plant, wrong place. It was, you know, the people we purchased the house from, the lady really loved plants, and she wanted to have these specimen plants, and she wanted to be able to be close to them so she could see them. And so, anyway, that's what you see here. Okay, right here, this little tree right here, you can see the top of it right here. That's a crepe myrtle. Okay, this right here is also a crepe myrtle. This crepe myrtle right here was the same height as this crepe myrtle. But I went in and actually had to prune that to prevent the city from pruning it for me. Okay, I knew that if they would come in and do it, it would not be a good thing, okay? And so I actually pruned it. I've got a story I'm going to tell you a little bit later on about emerald ash borer on crepe myrtle, okay? But these again, right plant, wrong place. Okay, here's a picture of that cryptomerium again. You see how tall it is? And that light pole, and then this, the hazel nut here, okay? Right plant, wrong place. Okay. Now, I wanted to also show you, see this high brick wall? This was where, this is our front porch, and our next door neighbor is literally an arm's reach away. And my wife loves to sit up here with a glass of wine and watch the traffic and watch the world go by. But there was a cedar tree planted right here. And it was an American cedar. And it had grown way out of control, and I was concerned about the breaking of the foundation. And so I said, okay, I'll pull that thing out for it. I'll pull that out. And I said, I'll get some kind of screening between us and the neighbor. And so what I decided to do is to put some giant arborvitaes. Okay, if you look, there's a lot of space in between here. And what I'm looking at is what the final growth is when it gets big. Because they will get big, and I can tell you that about from here up was brand new growth this year. So it's grown about 3 feet this year. And it will take up all this space. But in the interim, I'll put a box up here. I'll put some bamboo, some clumping bamboo in a container up here to try to screen out. And then I've got some jasmine here trying to climb the wall so that I can get some kind of screening for the next 2 to 3 years until I can get these bad boys bigger. okay, to provide some screening. Okay, I want to talk a little bit now about our climate. What climate zone are we in? 7. Okay, well, you're not supposed to read that. How many already knew? Show of hands, how many already knew? Okay, 7B. So what does that mean? What does 7B mean? Okay, it means that the temperatures, you can expect temperatures between 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit for a couple extended days, right? And the reason I put Wake County on here is obviously that's where I live, and so I'll just change this name for our next class and we'll put Orange County there next time. But anyway, as you notice here in the center, there's a line kind of right here. We actually have in Orange County some microclimates, okay? As well as you, I'm sure, have microclimates. What would cause a microclimate? Microclimate is basically a change in temperature, either shortened or prolonged, from extraneous factors such as, what's that? Hardscape. What does hardscape do? Does it make more temperature or less temperature? Okay, why?
Because it absorbs the...
It holds the heat, it grabs the heat, and then that heat radiates during the night, exactly. Okay, hardscapes, what else?
Jordan Lake.
Water, I'm sorry, what else?
Jordan Lake.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Jordan Lake.
Jordan Lake, okay. So water, okay? The proximity to water can cause a microclimate, okay? What else?
Slope of the land.
Slope topography, that's good, fantastic. So you guys are kind of thinking about what could affect this zone. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes whenever we go to the light presentation as well. Okay, what is meant by, the heat zone? What is a heat zone map? Anybody tell me what a heat zone map is? What is it? Okay, heat zone map, basically it talks about, right over here, it's the average number of days above 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so for example, here in Durham, we're at a 7, so that means 60 to 90 days, the temperature is above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, on an average, okay, an average year, right? So, when you look at plants, as we say that, climate change, global warming, all these buzzwords that we keep using, the heat index is becoming more and more important because certain plants may be able to tolerate cold and may survive in a lower, say a zone 6, whereas they may have a heat tolerance, that they can only sustain for, a heat zone category of maybe a 3 or a 4, so 14 to 30 days. So the longer nights affect things. For example, is anybody in here growing cherries? Anybody? Or what kind of cherries are you growing?
I put in a black cherry and it's doing terribly.
Okay, and why do you think that is?
It's way too warm here.
And why is it too warm? It's got to have a number of chilling hours at night. So if the temperature is too hot at night, it doesn't get the chilling hours that it required to bloom and to prosper. Okay? Excuse me. I picked up some allergies, ladies, so I have to apologize. Okay, talking about microclimates. Okay, things that we mentioned topography. We talked about hardscapes. Okay, what about buildings or shade? Okay, tree shade, building shade. All of those affect the temperature at the ground level. Okay, and they create kind of a microcosm or microclimate. Soil erosion, how would that affect microclimate?
Soils hold, especially moist soils.
I'm sorry, say again?
Moist soils hold heat and water.
Okay, good.
And so if you have the erosion, you're not not gonna have the water.
Okay, we've lost organic matter. We don't have the soil capacity for water capacity. We don't have nutrient capacity, and it has the potential. It's part of that ability, basically, for us to have a microclimate because of soil erosion. Okay, very good. Remember I was telling you the story of the lady who was trying to put in, her plants were slowly dying? Well, what happened is she has a very shaded area. So first of all, she wasn't getting a lot of light. And whenever we go to the light image presentation, it will come clearly evident. Well, I hope it does. It did to me whenever I saw it. The planting that she has is along a bank, but she only gets about 4 hours of direct sunlight, and that sunlight is in the morning. So the morning sun is not intense. You know, plants that can tolerate full sun, partial sun, it would do well, and they could take direct sunlight in the morning. But if you were to put that same plant in a location that has direct sun in the afternoon, it would kill it. Okay. So anyway, her planting where she has them had wrong plant, wrong location. Okay. And it's because she basically has a microclimate. Okay, when we talk about sunlight, you know, full sun, what does that mean? Full sun is 8 hours or more a day, okay, direct sun. And then part sun, 4 to 8 hours. Morning sun, indirect, less intense. Tolerated by most shade plants. And then the afternoon sun, it's hotter and more intense. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and take you over just 1 second. Okay, one of our master gardeners, Lee Simpson, I don't know if any of you know her, very, very intelligent lady in Orange County, but she put together this presentation, so I'm just going to go through it. These are the things that we're just going to quickly cover. Okay, the reason I want to show you this is because I like putting pictures with words. And so if you look at direct sunlight, it kind of gives you an hour, 6 to 8 hours of direct sun. And then part sun filtered, okay, and you can kind of see how much shade you have there. Partial shade, full shade, and then dense shade. I will tell you, if you have a yard that has dense shade, no matter how much grass seed you throw down, over time you will not get grass to grow there. Okay, even though it is a research-based, will tolerate shade. Okay, I will tell you because I've experienced it, I've seen it. We've done, buku attempts, many attempts to try to get grass growing there. The gentleman's reseeded over and over and over. But if you are in full sun, full shade, dense shade, you will not get grass to grow there for an extended period of time. Okay, full sun. Okay, this I thought was really, really interesting. If you are at a southern exposure, if your house or your garden is in a southern exposure, what happens in respect to sunlight? When you get sunlight in a southern exposure? Anybody know? First thing in the morning, right? As soon as it peaks up over the treetop, you have direct exposure because our sun comes up kind of southeast from us. Okay? So as the sun tracks across the horizon, it starts in the southeast, and then it hits the north-facing. If you're on a hill and you've got a north-facing garden lawn, it's the last to get the sun. It's going to be more direct, and it's going to be hotter. Okay? And it's probably going to be there less time, less hours of the day. Okay, anybody know what PAR is? I didn't know exactly what it was. I had to look at it. It's like luminance. It is how much light is needed for gardens, for plants to grow. Is basically it's a scale. It's kind of like lumens. It's not. You've heard of luminance. It's how much light is needed. So basically, what this is showing, as you go around the different months of the year, you can see across the United States where the light is and how much illumination you're getting. If you look in June and July, and then it's starting to fade in August, September, and then less and less as it goes through the winter. Okay, this is what it explains that last slide. Okay, if you'll notice that in the winter, the orbits change. The sun is actually further away from the Earth during the summer. But what it does is it actually changes the angle in which the light is hitting the Earth. Okay? And then as we go through our seasons, that as it moves towards the equator, the sun moves to the equator, it gets closer. It gets closer to the Earth. But that angle shifts, and that's why the fall and springtime. So basically, the light moves, it's higher ahead, and then spring and fall is kind of in the middle, and then the late in the winter, it's low on the horizon, and it has less parents, and so it has less ability to grow plant material later in the winter. Before we had air conditioning, houses were built to take into consideration light. And for example, the school buildings, they put them so that they would get a lot of light during the winter, the windows, and then in the summer, they would get less light, okay? Because they're trying to cool the buildings down when the kids were in school, since we had no air conditioning. So that was kind of one of those strategies to take into consideration. Okay, again, we're going to look at here in a second about the aspect of the winter versus the summer. And you can see the summer at noon, the angle that the sun is in, that's kind of really what it's showing here. And then the casting of shadows. See how long the shadows are, in the winter? Okay, and this is what we were talking about, the aspect ratio of where, if your garden is southern facing, where is the light going to be? When it hits at the beginning, you're going to have it along this fence line. What you've got is you've got shade stuff that's casting shadows. You've got shade here. I'm sorry, this is shade, and this is shade. So the sun's coming in here, okay? And then as it moves through the day, the shade changes, and then it opens up, and then again, if you've got a northern facing, you've got longer, and what you've got is your shadow here from the house. So this is really showing basically that your planning, where to put plants, is affected by how much sunlight you have. Okay, there is a program out there. I can show it to you. I've got it on my phone, but it's really kind of cool. It's an app you put on your phone, and you look. You push looking forward, and then you kind of hold it on the horizon, and you can see where the sun is arcing across. And you can look and you can carry it around and you say, well, I'm standing right here. I want to put a tree here. I want to put a shrub here. How much sunlight is it going to get? So I'll just hold it, see where my arc is, and then see what trees are blocking it, and say, oh, okay, it's going to get shade from this time to this time based on this application. Anyway, okay, this is east-west. This is kind of the same thing we were looking at before versus north and south. And then again, we were talking about where you've got a lot of slopes in the mountains. How you've got a southern facing, first to get sunlight, and then late in the evening. Okay. basically, I'm not going to cover this right here. I'm just going to skip through this. Okay, these are some plants that will do well. These are the shade variances. Remember how we talked about shade loving? The ones in the red that are in red are actually native plants, and these are trees that would do well with the shade of a 1 to 2. And let me go back. Here's the scale. Light shade is 1, medium shade is 2, and heavy shade is 3. Okay. And so I've got this list, and I'll be glad to share this PowerPoint presentation with you if you want to go back and kind of try to understand or look at it, or even if you're wanting to find a species that meets that does really well in shade, part shade or full sun. Okay, vines and curves. Okay. Where are you? Okay, again, this is kind of talking about the same concepts. Dappled sunlight is, you can see from the picture on the right how the sun is kind of filtering through. It's not direct, it's dappled or filtered shade. Partial, and then there's the definitions of those for you if you really want to know. Okay, as we're talking about plants, let's talk about drainage. And how important is it for plants to have good drainage? It's pretty important, right? So how do you know if you've got good drainage or not? What's the test for figuring it out?
A perk test.
Okay, perk test. So how do you do a perk test?
You basically, I don't know, I'd have to look up the specifics, but you dig a hole, you put a certain amount of water in it, and you watch it and observe it and see how long it takes, like up to 12 hours to drain.
Okay, all right. That's very good. And that's what we're going to do during the break, or after the break. We're actually going to go outside, we're going to do a perk test, we're going to dig a hole. And basically it's about 15 inches, 12 to 15 inches deep, and we're going to fill it with water, okay? And then we're going to watch it. We're going to see how quick that hole drains. If it drains within, they say 24 hours, but 12 hours would be better. If you've got sandy soils, it'll go almost instantaneous. It just won't stay around. You can't keep it full because the pore size is so large in the sand that the water just continues to go right through it. We in Orange County have a lot of clay soils. We do have some loam soils that have a higher holding capacity. And as water trickles through, it's bound up. The clay particles are so small, and they're like plates, if you can imagine, a bunch of paper plates that are stacked on top of each other and top of each other. And that's basically what clay looks like, okay, under a microscope. And then, so water has a real tough time finding a way through that. And so clay really holds water a long time. You have to water less frequently when you have clay soil. But loam is one that has a mixture. It can have some clay in it, but the loam soils kind of let water pass. It slows it down. It's not as fast as water. The particles are bigger than clay, so it's kind of in between. Ashley, pronounce that.
Xeric.
Say again?
Xeric.
Xeric.
It sounds like a Z instead of an X.
Okay, xeric, okay. I couldn't find how to pronounce it. So anyway, she's my dictionary. So anyway, xeric, it never lets water stand in soil, and sandy soils would be a prime example of this. Okay, what is the deal with pH? Tell me about pH. Why is pH a growing consideration? Yeah.
It affects nutrient uptake.
Fantastic. Oh, I wish I had something to give you, because normally I would give you something. I'll find something, okay? I'll find something, But that's exactly right, nutrient uptake. And have y'all seen the chart, the pH chart? Have you showed them that chart? It's got like an arrow, it's got a pH of 1 to 14, and it's got an arrow, and bands get bigger and narrow as it goes across based on the pH. Well, basically what happens when you talk about pH is certain minerals and micronutrients become less available or non-available, okay, to the plant. So it can't uptake it. Okay, it bonds it up. And manganese is a good one. Manganese and magnesium, those are two that are frequently I see on soil reports because the pH is too low. And so if you bring the pH up to the target range, it means that those nutrients, it frees up those nutrients, it breaks the bonding, and you know, from the scientific perspective, all you really need to know is that if you add lime, it brings the pH up, it frees up these sites on the particles, the clay or whatever, to allow those nutrients to attach to the root tips. Okay, so root uptake. Changing the pH and lime is one of the cheapest things you can ever do to amend your soil, okay, to help your soil, and to make your dollar go further. Okay, and what do I mean by that? I'm going to pass this around. I told you I like show and tell. How many of you ever wanted to know what phosphorus looked like? Well, this is TSP. It's a fertilizer. Anyway, I'm going to pass this around. You can look at these different kinds of amendments.
Thanks.
But again, those things cost a lot of money. Lime doesn't cost much at all. And if you get the pH right, then those nutrients become much more available, and you need less of them for the plant to be able to take them up. Okay. Okay. This is a great picture. Remember those pictures we talked about, right plant, wrong place? Now, what did they not do in here? Okay, can you guys at the back see? Okay, this is actually a house, okay? And these are Leland cypress. Okay, they put one on each corner of the house. Okay, I guess they wanted to shade their house, but what they didn't take into consideration is what the final form is going to look like. In this picture, what it's really showing is you can see the width of the sidewalk, and this row of shrubs. It's a hedge. It was designed as a screening hedge. Well, it's actually grown over the sidewalk, and so you've only kind of got one lane of traffic here. And then, of course, the crepe myrtle is planted literally right at the tree line, the drip line of the house. Okay, wrong place, and you can see that it's well outgrown its space. And again, don't forget the roots. Okay, why are roots important? Because obviously the tree has to have those to uptake its nutrients. But again, the roots can also damage foundations. Now, here's what it looks like. This I think is a really good picture, demonstration. If you take a look at the feeder roots, you've got these things, and look how far out they are. You've got your tree here, and how many times have you heard people say, well, fertilize out to the drip line? Okay? Well, are you really getting any kind of results? If you were to from about here out to here, okay, you're really fertilizing the anchor roots, right? Okay? The transport roots are kind of like a super highway. They're not actually absorbing because they're too big to absorb those nutrients. Your feeder roots are the ones that are out here that are actually taking up those nutrients for the tree. So kind of a rule of thumb, 2 to 2.5 times the drip line is how far out you want to be fertilizing when you're talking about shrubs and so forth. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
If you're digging and you kill off or you chop through a lot of those feeder roots, is that really damaging to the tree if they're really...
That's a good question, and I would say partly it is. Initially, it's a bit of a shock to the plant, and it depends on what you're doing. If you're just isolating, if I were to take a shovel, there's something called root pruning, and it's quite common in nurseries that do ball and burlap. What they do is every year as the plant grows, they go out and they put a spade down, that deep, okay, all the way around this tree, and then they leave it alone. And what happens is every time you have a cut, it stimulates a growth hormone in the plant saying, hey, I've been damaged, and it stimulates root growth, okay? So to go out there to actually cut, if I'm digging here and I actually cut a root, okay, it's not gonna kill half the plant unless the plant's really under stress. And so does that answer your question? If you decide you're going to do root pruning, you want to do that in the spring, okay? And the reason for that is that as the plant breaks dormancy, that's when the root pruning would be best. Again, it stimulates growth for those roots and it makes them more fibrous, okay? Okay, we talked about growth form. So if I wanted to have a plant, I'm trying to cover a bank, okay, because it's too steep to mow. I probably would get one of these prostrate types of plants. I could get it mounding or spreading, okay? And what's an example of one of these plants? Any idea?
Prostrate rosemary.
A juniper, okay, what kind of juniper? A blue lake, or, there's quite a few different types. The sergeant's juniper, any of these junipers kind of spread. They're looking for different types of form. If you're wanting, one of the recommendations whenever I was speaking to the lady about replacing her holly, what I told her was do not get a plant that is pyramidal, with like a pyramid, or one that has a bunch of trunks. You've seen these evergreens, that have multiple trunks. And why is that? Any idea?
My stems are shredded.
They tend to break. That's exactly right. When you have a snow load or anything like that, it puts pressure on it and it kind of opens up, and then it'll break on you. That's exactly right. Okay. And again, we talked about the microclimates. So anyway, the growth forms. These are the forms. Again, I want to point out the NCSU database for tools for selecting plants. But here's one that you may not have heard about, and you may want to write this down. Okay, it's called Going Native. Okay, so if you decide you want to go to if you're looking for native plants, this is a great place to go. And it actually tells you how to create a native plant design. Why would you want to go native? Any idea?
Less inputs.
Why is it less inputs? Adaptability, right? Okay, and but anyway, yes, you're absolutely right. Adaptability. I'm going to put my mask on here because I wanted to show a couple things. How many of you have ever seen a plant that's been root bound? Okay. Well, I want to show you some plants that are root bound. I had a client come to me and say, my industrial hemp died, and I don't know why. So, whoops. And basically what happened was the plant grew so fast that the hole that they put it in, the cup that they put it in, it just couldn't contain it. So, if you look here, that actually looks like the pot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay? And this is a pine tree. Look out. Okay? And so is there anything you can do? Is there anything you can do about root-bound plants when you buy them?
Don't buy them.
Okay.
Look up, try to tap it out and look at it.
Oh, I wish I could give you something too. Okay, I'm gonna find something here. Okay, may have to run down to the store. But so what do? You take the plant. I'm trying to make too out of a mess. When you said tap it out, You're never supposed to pick it up like that, like I just did, okay? But what you do is you try to kind of turn it upside down and just tap it, right? You kind of slowly look and start looking at what's there. Okay, what color are the roots? What color are they supposed to be? White, right? Okay. If you look at this, I've got a little bit of kind of browning roots over here, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. It doesn't really look like it's root bound, okay? I don't see so many fibrous roots right now. But again, this is a little bit under stress because it's not been watered lately. So, but just tap it out, take a look at that. So what do you do if you find a plant that is root bound and you've already bought it?
You can kind of shave down the sides, right?
Okay.
A little bit.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about planting this that has a fibrous root, but when you have a plant that actually has wooden stems, okay, if they are still flexible, when you pull it out and you kind of straighten those roots out, if they straighten out, you're okay. But if you try to straighten it out and it still forms in a circle, you need to prune those roots off. Okay? Literally cut them off. Take your pruners and cut them off. Okay? And I've been successful when you dig a hole and you figure out the size of your hole, and we'll talk a little bit more about planting here in a minute, but you've got to rough the edges. When I say rough the edges, that means the roots have got to have a place to be able to push outward. And if you think about it, you can imagine how your hair kind of sticks straight up if it's cut. Like my hair is cut, can't you tell it's standing straight up, right? Okay, well that's kind of like a root ball, okay? If you put my head in the ground, the direction that my hair normally is going is the direction that needs to be able to penetrate. Now, the roots don't penetrate too much to the bottom, they normally go to the sides, okay? So we've changed our recommendations in terms of how we plant a root ball and how we dig the hole. It used to be we dig it 2.5 times as deep and 2.5 times as wide, okay? But we've come to find out that that's been a bad recommendation, research-based, okay? And the reason what happens is as the soil settles, that tree ends up sinking down into that softer soil and actually being planted too low. So, okay, container plants. When can you plant a container plant? What time of the season? When can you not plant a container plant? When? I would argue that's not true. You can plant a container plant any time of the year. Okay? The only difference is in the summer, you've got to add more water to it, you've got to keep it watered because it's going to be under stress anytime you plant. But container plants are kind of the exception. It's best to plant in the spring or fall because they have a better chance of survival. Okay? But with a container plant, you can literally plant any time of the year. Balled and burlap, when do you plant those?
Spring or fall.
Okay, spring or fall, okay. And why is that? Again, it's all about, if you look at, the reason we have to think about the logic behind the balled and burlap. Basically what they're doing is they're taking this huge tree, like this right here, okay? And imagine if that thing has root system underneath it. And whenever I dig that thing out of the ground, I've got to be able to manhandle it or manage it from the point of digging to where I'm going to plant it. And usually it's miles and miles away. So what I'll do is I'll create a ball, I'll get some soil and I'll get the root. But before I do that, I will go in and I'll do the root pruning like we talked about every year as I'm leading up to it so that it has real fibrous roots in this root ball zone. I'll dig the hole, I'll pull this root ball up, I'll slide it over on a piece of burlap, I'll tie it up, and when I was in college, I actually worked for a landscaper, and we did a lot of this ball and burlapping. It's hard work, especially by hand, but it can be done. But what's happening is that ball doesn't have as many root systems to support that big tree. So if you were to plant that in the summer, the heat of the summer, or in the winter, it just wouldn't have a chance to take hold. It would probably die. Okay. So what about bare root? When do you want to plant bare root? When? No, you're going to plant that in the winter. That's a good guess, though, and let me tell you why. First of all, does anyone know why they sell it bare root?
Less weight.
Okay, that's part of it. That's very good. Part of it's less weight. Why else? Okay, because most of these are going to be catalog order. Okay. But they're also trying to prevent pathogens from moving across state lines. So what they do is they take all the soil off. They treat the roots, but the only time they can dig these is when they're dormant. Okay, and so once you get these things, they're usually packed in a cardboard that's been wetted down, or sawdust. Something that you can easily pull it out. You don't want to leave the bulb or the bare root in its container for long. You want to stick it in. Want to hydrate it for an hour up to 12 hours, and then plant it immediately. Okay. So if you order, usually a fruit tree would be a good example, or a nut tree like pecans would be an example of one of those trees. I ordered an Oriental persimmon, and I think I've got a picture of it somewhere in my slideshow that a little bit later on that I'll show you guys. But I ordered this guy, and I planted it just as I was told. I've hydrated it, and it did not bloom out. It didn't bud out. It was July before that thing even popped its buds. And I said, this thing is dead. I said, I'm going to yank this thing out of the ground. And I said, no, it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed for a year. So if it leaves out, great. If it doesn't, I'll get my money back. So in July, this thing finally started to leaf out, and it was a whip. They call it a whip. A whip means it comes up. It's just a single. It was about this tall out of the ground. Right now, it's about this big around, and it's about this tall, but it's leaning. Okay, and I love being an extension agent because I get a chance to observe stuff. Okay, and I couldn't figure out why in the world my tree. Now I said, I know I planted that thing straight up and down. I pulled out my level and I leveled it, and I know that it was straight up and down when I planted it. Then I noticed the next door neighbor. He had some trees that were leaning. Okay, and he actually put some ropes on them, and he was trying to tie them up. And I started looking. Why in the world are these trees leaning like that? And then it dawned on me. Where we live, it has a lot of shade. And so the trees were actually responding to the sunlight. They were actually trying to get to the sunlight. And that's the only way it could get to that sunlight. And so that's why my persimmon is leaning. Now people say persimmons won't grow. Oriental persimmons won't grow this far north. Well, I would argue they will. I've got proof of it. We've got a lady in Orange County that grows Oriental persimmons. She's got she had about 100 trees. She lost half of them the first year. But now she's got persimmons that she is growing, and I've got a neighbor who actually has a persimmon in Raleigh. Every year she gives them away. They're beautiful. They're big Oriental persimmons. If you like persimmons, they're to die for. They're fantastic. But they cost about $2.50 a piece when you go to the store, because they're, when you find them in food line somewhere.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
So I have read some people say about the container, if you're taking something like a woody ornamental in a container, that they actually say not only knocking off the potting soil, but literally rinsing it all off with a hose to where you almost get to a bare root to plant it.
Okay, that is a great question. There's a lot of debate on that. Here's my take: is if you purchase a plant from a reputable dealer, reputable nursery, then you're probably going to be okay without having to do that. And what you're really trying to do is to prevent from bringing in pathogens that may have come in. There are things that you can get like Phytophthora, root rots that are really bad, or the worst, fire ants okay? And you know, that you definitely don't, if you don't have one on your property, you don't want them. And if they're on the neighbor's property, you want to spray your yard just to prevent it. I mean, that's how bad they are. But yeah, personally, I think if you get it from a reputable dealer, you really don't have to be overly concerned. Is that?
And there's just a lot of debate, even within like the tree community, on exactly how far you go. So if you hear, Barb Fair is one of our tree specialists at NC State. She works with landscapers a lot, so she does a shaving technique or a cutting technique because she knows people need to move fast because they're making money on it. Whereas someone like Katie Rose, who used to run Trees Durham, she works with volunteers who have time to really tease out a root ball. So they'll do that because they have the time for it, and both work really well. It's just about like what are the other factors you're taking into consideration.
Very good.
Yeah.
Is that answer your question? Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, now let's talk about the hole. Okay, I told you that we've changed our philosophy on how we're digging the hole. Now we're saying, okay, 2 to 3 times wider than the ball itself. Okay, and we kind of like a saucer. This looks like an upside down flying saucer. Okay, so that the ball or the plant is actually in the hole, and the root, the top of the soil is either at grade level, or just a little bit above the grade level. Okay, and the reason for that is we don't want that plant to settle down and to go down into the soil, after it settles. Okay. Here's one we're talking about, and I think we were talking earlier about what do you do if you've got a plant that has a lot of fibrous roots, okay? How do you plant that? And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you that here in a little bit, but in this lower right picture, it shows where you literally have a lot of root mass, and literally cutting that bottom ½ inch off. Okay, it won't hurt the plant. Okay, it's extra material. It's just in the way. And what I like to do is I carry a pocket knife. It's a razor blade, and what I do is I go down and I just literally score the side, 6 to 8 times around. And before I plant it, I kind of loosen up the ball a little bit, and then I stick it in the ground. I put some soil up to it, put a little bit of water in it. Okay, put some more soil in it, and then I take my foot and I step around. Just kind of firm it up. And what I'm trying to get to is good soil contact. Okay? That root system, you say, well, are you compressing the soil? Yes, I am. I'm actually putting some pressure on it, trying to get that soil to soil contact. Otherwise, you may have something that's called, I can't remember now what it's called. Basically what happens is the water itself creates a layer, and it won't bond. The two won't go together. And so by stepping it down, you're actually putting pressure on it and getting good soil contact. And then I put more water on it, water it in, and then I put some mulch up to it, pull some mulch up to it. Yes, ma'am?
Watering them before you put them in. My dad used to stick them in a bucket.
And that's great. That's all you're doing is hydrating them. That absolutely. And this plant, I bought it this morning. It was dry. I was going to tell the lady, hey, your plants out there suck because you haven't given them water. And this was the best looking one, but I didn't have time. I just didn't want to have that conversation. So, but anyway, hydrating your plants before you plant, but you still need to water them in because you don't want to have that. You don't want to have the water. Because what will happen is if you put water in it and then you don't water them afterwards, that water will wick away, okay, instead of back to the plant. Okay, this is a bulb and burlap. Now, this is what I was talking about. See how the root systems, they've actually forked this and kind of opened it up. They're breaking away. I would never do that. And let me just tell you why. Because if you have a ball and burlap, you're talking about a tree this size with a ball this big around, okay? Once I get that ball to where my final position where I want it, okay, I may take the burlap all the way off if it is plastic. If it has a metal cage on it, what I want to do is I want to try to remove as much as I can. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to fork it out, because if I break the ball up, the tree has less of a chance to survive. Okay? So it gives it a higher chance of a probability of surviving if I just leave it in the ball, cut the top part of the burlap out. Now, when you have a ball in burlap, if you have natural burlap, you want to ask, if you don't know if it's been treated or not, you can probably smell it. Number one, smell it. If it has a high chemical smell, your burlap has probably been treated, okay? And that's not a good thing. You need to take the burlap off. If it is a plastic film, you can tell that it's plastic. If you take a match to it and it kind of melts and it's plastic, synthetic, you want to get that stuff off of it before you plant it. But when I was learning to plant bulb and burlap, we actually just cut holes in the burlap and figured that the roots would penetrate through it. It will do okay, but you need to really try to remove the top third to 2/3 of the burlap. You don't ever want to have any of the burlap sticking out of the ground, okay, when you plant. Any idea why? That's exactly right. It'll wick the moisture away from the plant instead of into the plant, okay? So you definitely don't want to see any kind of burlap or anything left, okay, when you plant a bulb and burlap. A lot of times, you can see down here how they kind of made a mound because the hole was, they just wanted to put something up so that they can stick that ball on something, get a little bit higher up. Okay.
On the issue of sticking the plant in water, isn't there a time limit on that?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. You don't want to have it in the water for more than 12 hours. Depends on what kind of plant it is. Every plant has to have air to survive, okay? And we're talking even the root system. But even with bare roots, you don't want to have them exposed to air, constant air either, okay? The reason that those cloth bags are really good is because when the roots actually hit those, there's air can get to it. It actually it prevents those roots from penetrating it. Did you know that? And because roots don't like air, okay? It's kind of toxic if it's at 100%, okay? So yeah, but you soak it for an hour up to, until for this plant, this may take 20 minutes or so. Soak it so that it's just waterlogged, and then plant it, and then make sure you plant you water it after you put some soil around it. Okay. Okay. Bare roots. And when we talked about the bare roots, remember we talked about that's what they're coming. It's usually a whip. It's usually probably only about that tall. And then the root system, for example, pecans have a root system about that long. It's as deep as the top whip is. Very, very long root system for like pecans. Okay, so you really got to dig a deep hole to get those roots all the way down in, and you want to tease them out so that they're kind of heading like that. If you'll notice how they've done here, they put a kind of a mound of soil here. They put the first one. It usually takes 2 people to plant so that you can spread the roots out. You put a little bit more soil on and continue to build, spreading those root system out. And then you want to have at least the top 2 roots need to be relatively close to the surface of the soil. Okay, that way you've got your soil. The line of soil is about right. Okay. Okay, what do you put in the planting hole? Now, there's been a lot of discussion of do you amend the soil? And the recommendation is not to, okay? You can take some compost and you can amend it a little bit with compost, but what you're doing is you're actually creating a problem if you heavily amend it. Here's what I was talking about, the perched water tables. If you create a problem by amending the soil and then packing it in tight, what happens is the water hits in that one area, it stays in that water ball, but then it won't move out. The water that's coming up from the outside hits that soil line, and then it won't go in. So the roots are never finding the water.
Perched
Perched.
water tables
Mm-hmm.
or parched?
Perched.
Perched.
Perched water table. And then again, this is where I told you that I kind of go in and I'll put my foot on it and kind of just firm it up all the way around and then make sure it's got plenty of water. And some people like to create a little donut around the outside to hold water so you can pour water. Yes, sir?
So back to the previous slide about using backfill only. So, for example, like last year I brought shrub, and the person at the nursery said because of the clay like soil that I might want to put into my soil conditioner when I planted the shrub.
Right.
So is that not good?
That, yeah, soil conditioner is actually an amendment, and it's probably, it's one of those things that I would not put in with it. What they're really trying to get you to do is to use the parent material that the hole is dug in. If you're gonna, for example, plant, you know, a bed, for example, you till the whole bed, you get the whole bed ready, and you've already amended the soil and everything else, so you have a uniform planting area, okay? But specifically what we're talking about here is when you're planting a tree, or a balled and burlap plant, or, you know, a specimen plant, what is, you know, either in the center of a bed or something like that. You want to use the parent material that's around you.
Would you discourage top dressing it with a little bit of something?
I do, yes, and let me tell you why. That you fertilize, you don't want the plant, you want the plant to get established, okay? And the recommendation is when you plant that you don't fertilize until the following fall or spring, okay? Because if you do, you're actually encouraging fast growth, and that's really not what you want. You're wanting to get establishment, okay? And so top dressing, but I always would encourage putting on a mulch layer. I mean, is that what you're talking about, a mulch?
Yeah, I mean, would you think, in his situation, would you think, oh, well, maybe I could just top dress?
Yes, that would, yeah, to put a mulch layer on top would absolutely.
Or some kind of,
Organic matter would be okay, but on the top, but not in the hole.
But
Not combined in the hole, correct. And again, they said, they said organic matter is okay, 5 to 10%, okay. Organic matter, but what he's talking about is soil conditioner, which is, it's actually an amendment, and certain soil conditioners could be pine fines, is like a soil conditioner, and that's one that would cause that perched water table. Okay.
Hi, in terms of mulch, do you have a preference?
Of course.
Leaves or what do you do?
My preference is whatever I've got. Whatever's the cheapest that I can find, and if I'm going for a certain look, okay. For example, we're in an area that's got a lot of pine trees. I'll try to use what's local, what's native, pine needles or whatever as a mulch layer. But I understand that pine, it takes a long time for it to break down. It makes it more acidic. I mean, there's a lot of negatives to pine needles. But again, you're looking for the aesthetics. What are you really after? I have paid to get. Are you familiar with? I'm trying to remember what's that weed? The real weedy plant. Nut sage. How many of you know what nut sage is? Okay. Would you believe I paid to purchase 10 yards of nut sage for my yard? I did. I actually, it was not intentional. I bought wood chips or mulch from a reputable dealer, and when I got it and I got it spread and everything else, I said, "Oh my God, look at this nut sage! It's popping up everywhere. Everywhere that I spread this mulch had nut sage in it, and I'm having a devil of a time trying to control it. I mean, it's easy to pull and but I've used, I've gotten stuff, free wood chips. But I've also paid for, getting nut sage too. So anything that I can get, I've learned my lesson. Trying to figure out, how to save a buck here doesn't always mean saving a buck, but even sometimes when you have the money to spend, you know, you just got to make sure you look at it really carefully and weigh your options. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is your take, or would you recommend someone using synthetic mulch like rubber? Would you?
That's a good question. I mean, the question was about using synthetic, like the rubber, the tires and stuff like that. Here's the problem with mulch, is soon as you get soil on top of the mulch, okay, you then have a problem with weeds, okay, because now weeds have a place that they can thrive, okay, and if you can keep an area and you know, trying to be environmentally friendly by reusing, you know, recycling tires. You know, it looks great in certain areas, certain places, like, you know, kids' playgrounds and stuff like that. And, you know, it really serves a purpose. But, you know, I'm not against it. But again, you know, you have these purists that says, oh my God, you know, you're putting, you know, something that's made with, you know, with oil-based products, you know, on the soil, and I just don't want to do it. I'm doing everything organic. So I don't have a preference, you know, one way or the other. I think it looks good. But I don't think that I would use it because to me it's cost prohibitive. Okay. Okay, we're right at 10:34. So I think we're supposed to take a break for about half an hour. So what we're going to do is when we get done, we're going to come back in here. I'm going to go through the last bit of my slides and I'm going to run through them really kind of quickly. I didn't think it would take me this long to get to slide 32. So anyway, we'll come back and then after that we'll go outside and we'll do some testing. Okay?